Good afternoon and welcome to Finding Cost Savings with Legacy Data Management, a health system CIO Media Inc. production sponsored by Harmony Healthcare IT. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. My name is Anthony Guerra. I'm the Editor-in-Chief of Health System CIO, and I will be your moderator today. We're looking forward to your participation today. You could send your questions and comments in at any time in the Q&A box, and we'll have a little poll we're going to do later, get your reaction, and we'll have our panelists guess at your responses, which is always a lot of fun. Regarding a nice way to set up your screen today, you can click at the top in the center, get it into side-by-side mode, then you can adjust the divider to get the slides and the video boxes how you want them, and it should say speaker view in the top right-hand corner to get it to that view. Just so you see how we're going to spend our time today, first we're going to go about 35-40 minutes with our main panel discussion featuring David Lundal, CIO at Children's Minnesota, Lorri Page-Santacruz, Director, Enterprise Architecture with Northern Light Health, and Jim Hammer, VP of Operations and Product Development with Harmony Healthcare IT. So let's jump right in and get started. We're going to have a good conversation today. Dave, can you start off by giving us an overview of your organization and your role?
Yeah, happy to. So first of all, Dave Lundal. I'm the Chief Information Officer at Children's Minnesota. I've been there for about 15, 16 months, something like that, very much enjoying it. Children's Minnesota is a independent, freestanding pediatric hospital and health system. It's been that way since 1924. It does business primarily in the Twin Cities region, but we draw patients from a five-state draw of the Dakotas, Iowa, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. And excel in many things, and I'm very much enjoying being there.
Excellent, Dave. Thank you. Lorri?
Hi there. Yes, I'm Lorri Page-Santacruz. I'm at Northern Light Health, which is the most expansive healthcare system in Maine. You might formerly have heard of us as EMHS. I've been there about 23 years, and over that time, I've seen us grow from a single hospital to 10 hospitals. We have about 650,000 practice visits at 37 primary care locations, which will be important to our talk today because every one of those had a different EMR. And I have a few roles, but the one that brings me here today is Enterprise Architect. And it's my role to know a little bit about every application and use throughout Northern Light Health. So I run the program that aims to reduce that large number of applications and consolidate our end user population into enterprise-wide applications wherever possible. As you can imagine, preserving legacy data is a topic that comes up daily for me. So this is going to be a lot of fun to share my experience with you here today.
Excellent, Lorri. Looking forward to it. Jim?
Jim Hammer, VP with Harmony Healthcare IT. We are a health data management organization, so any data-related process service challenge from data extraction, migration, and a heavy emphasis on data decommissioning and archival is what we do. We've got two offices. We're headquartered in South Bend, Indiana, with a nationwide, actually North American reach. Clients really in every state, and look forward to the panel today.
All right, very good. All right, first question, Dave, we're going to start with you. What steps was your organization forced to take in terms of canceling elective procedures to combat COVID-19, and what was the financial impact?
Yeah, Anthony, I think any and all are the steps that we had to take. And so I think any listeners from any health system across the country probably had to take these steps of reducing elective procedures at the governor's request. And I think in addition to that, a lot of what was still open, patients self-elected or family self-elected to stay home, and we switched to virtual. The impact on that was quite severe in the millions and millions of dollars. Luckily, there's been federal and state relief And that has been very, very helpful and continues to be very, very helpful. But despite that, we did have to do, again, what a lot of health systems have done, and we did the belt tightening. So, from a budget standpoint, we did everything that you might expect when any of us have been through hard, tough budget times where hey, travel's done, education's done. And do we have any consultants here? Can we get the consultants out and stop the burn rate on that? We did those things, but also there were pay cuts, and also there were furloughs. And I think things continue. It seems like we've weathered the storm, but it was a quite impactful thing COVID has been to us.
Jim, what did you see among customers?
Yeah, I think on the onset, it was pretty acute. So kind of day one of kind of nationwide shutdown, a lot of our IT counterparts really got shifted to hypercritical things like standing up additional facilities, setting up Wi-Fi, any kind of connectivity for the expected influx of patients. So that immediately stopped CAB processes pretty much across the board for a period of really March, which kind of forced us to move into how could we augment services to help our customer partners so they could focus on those things. But after March, it kind of picked back up, and now we're actually seeing a lot of folks coming back and starting back up on their projects really in earnest if they slowed those down.
All right, very good. All right, next question, Dave, again. Has the financial impact on the organization affected the IT budget? And if not, do you expect it to?
Yeah, I think this year, obviously our budget was impacted, and we're going to come in several $1 million under what was budgeted for the year. Projects that were on the plate were put on hold and have not been turned on yet. Positions that we had in the budget, added to the budget, those have been put on hold. In some instances when people have left, we have decided not to fill those positions at this time. So definite impact on this year. Now next year's budget, we're just starting to get into the budget season, Anthony, so we haven't had the ask to us, but I think the anticipation, it's a very difficult thing to try to figure out what is next year going to look like. And I think that, I give so much credit to the financial planners that try to prognosticate what's going to happen, but you're trying to figure out, okay, what are volumes gonna be? And they've come back, but they haven't come back to pre-COVID levels yet. So what, how's that going to extend? And I think the other thing, and you try to use the past as a guide, and for us, like, all right, what happened in 2008? What was it like for the next couple of years after that? And we're clearly moving into something like a recession type activity. And a recession type activity, things like your payer mix changes. And if your payer mix changes to more governmental payer, maybe even more with no insurance, your reimbursement rate's going to decline. So I think in any of the prognostication, I think what's going to come down is, hey folks, revenue is going to be less than we were planning for. So therefore, IT and all other departments, what can we do to match expenses to that lower revenue? So I think we're going to be heading into a tough budget season.
And Dave, governance is always important, but when you have to reduce the budget, it's even more important, right? So it's, hey, okay, we have a smaller pie to work with, so now we have to be even sharper about the things that we can do, because we can't do everything, right? So tell me about the importance of that.
Yeah, governance is critical, and I always found, Anthony, it's a twofold governance, right? So I think there's the governance on the big projects, maybe the big technologies, and that's an important one. But often that's the easier one to do. And you as a CIO, you can work with the senior leadership team, and as long as you've got your team kind of lined up, guys, what are the projects? And we have to know ourselves, right? So if we have projects A through F. Putting up the technology budget, okay, what might we need to pay outside our four walls to do these things, but also how much time is it going to take us to do these? So you have to know yourself and what the capacity is and the demand, match that. But you can have those conversations on the big items with the senior team, and it's important to do that. And I think a lot of organizations do that. Where you get tripped up is, all of the dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of other requests that fall in the category of they're too small to really go through a, you know, you don't need to bother the senior team with them, but when you add them all up, you could die a death of 1,000 cuts with all of that demand. So having governance in place for those as well is a critical item. And without both, you and your team are really going to still suffer with what happens is you get into the, it's a very passive, it ends up being seen almost like a passive aggressive no, because you can't do everything. And so people think that things, hey, I followed the procedure, I asked for this, you know, where is it? And it turns out that you can't do it. And so then that's where dissatisfaction with IT can come in. So you have to have both levels of governance, both for the big and for the small things coming through.
Wow, excellent point, Dave. Appreciate that. All right, next question, Lorri. Let's start with you. What are some of the ways that IT can reduce expenses, and is reducing the application portfolio? I would say, of course, it is one. Is it a major one of these?
Oh, absolutely. You know, by reducing your application portfolio, you have the opportunity to really reduce the operational burden of maintaining availability of systems, of maintaining access to them, of maintaining any backups and redundancy for, you know, preservation of the data. And frankly, they just take up space in what's a pretty precious data storage environment. So, you know, all of these things have a cost to them, and they're a big part of what helps build a compelling ROI for doing what we here at Northern Light Health call application rationalization. So yeah, definitely.
All right, very good. Jim?
Yeah, I think to that end, when we do our discovery with clients, we go through a rationalization process and prioritization kind of review, and expense reduction is primarily a key driver, certainly for the business, you know, as well as other things like reliability of infrastructure and such, and stability and resource capability to support those applications. But a key driver is usually always expense reduction and looking to decommission, you know, past inventories, moving towards our production systems.
So Jim, that's part of the service or an additional service. So for example, you might have a customer come in, potential customer, and say, we know exactly what applications we want to sunset. We want you to come in and help us do the work. But they could also have you could also have someone come in and say, we don't know. We know we have too much stuff, but we're not even sure how to figure out what to get rid of. We want you to come in and do that. Do you do both types of work?
We do, yeah. During our pre-sale process, a lot of our discovery will help with that. So exactly like you mentioned, a lot of times we'll be involved with some larger health systems that some are centralized and very organized and have all of that in their inventory portfolio system, so it's readily available. But I'd say a good majority don't. To your point, they're through mergers and acquisitions, they may not even know who their counterparts are in the facilities. So a lot of times we'll provide that kind of glue to help kind of rationalize and provide some best practice of how to go about gathering the inventory and then rationalizing and prioritizing that inventory for them. So absolutely.
And what kind of information are you collecting? You need to know the contract, who purchased it, how long, what's the agreement? Like you need to actually see the contract, because you say, okay, we don't need this, but you're stuck with this for a long time, right?
Yeah, a lot of times we'll help with certain customers may not know how to negotiate with their source vendor. So just because their original contract says one thing doesn't mean that they can't renegotiate. So a lot of times we'll help with that. Could be things like it's becoming a little bit more prevalent around what data blocking. If you're familiar with the Cures Act that's come out, some vendors will charge exorbitant amounts to their customers to get the data from that source vendor if we have to basically go to the vendor. A lot of times we try to do all the extraction work ourselves to minimize that cost for our customers, but things like exactly like you said, maintenance renewals, costs of renewals, anything that might be hidden around that. Infrastructure stability is key. A lot of source systems that we see are 20 years plus old. So they're very fragile, I guess you'd say, the original environment. So there's a concern that if it's shut down or goes down, we may not be able to bring that back up. And depending on the data, specifically clinical, as you'd imagine, very critical for patient care still. So, you look at things like that. So maybe there might be a cost driver for one, but another one might be the stability of the system, and it might have a smaller renewal maintenance fee. but that's got to come first because we need to get that off the inventory. Then we go down to softer things like, do I have any expertise around that source application before they may leave or transition to positions, as an example. Again, we've got a tool that kind of helps our customers walk through that if they haven't done that rationalization and prioritization on their own.
Dave, it's very interesting what Jim said about contracts. So your thoughts, you could address the question on the screen, but also from what Jim was saying, a contract is not a contract. Right? I mean, you could see it and you could say, let's say it was there before you got there and you see it and you go, oh, this is extreme. I can't believe we signed this, right? So you can talk to the vendor. The vendors you could say, listen, can we renegotiate this, or this is not what I'm interested in? You might get an answer, oh, no problem. You never know, right?
Yeah. I think it's, in my experience, the vendor community, let me start to say, referrals are really, really important, right? And I think, having worked in the vendor space, referrals are a critical item. And so I think within that, you want happy customers and you want happy former customers, right? So I think that makes, just from that basis, that makes any contract negotiable. All right, let's talk about this, right? Because really what we're talking about here is a relationship, and we want to do everything we can to keep who we have. We want to keep you as a customer, and we want to keep good relations there. But as well, if you need to adjust something, and if that adjustment ultimately leads to us leaving, we still want to have happy former customers. So I think everyone being reasonable, and I know myself, the way I try and approach it as well is that everyone's trying to make a living, right? And I don't, I never approach my relationship with vendors as an adversarial one. I'm trying to do a job, they're trying to do a job. I've got goals and objectives, and including expense reduction and meeting payroll, et cetera, as does whoever I'm negotiating with on the other side. Whether it be a small business or a large business. And at the end of the day, everyone wants to do well. And I think as long as you keep that in mind, things are negotiable.
And you would say, in general, you receive that same kind of feeling back. What percentage of the time have you felt, wow, this vendor they don't care. They don't care what I'm saying. Is that very rare?
I think that is very rare. And the only thing that's coming to my mind right now these days, Anthony, is upfront in negotiating the contract up front when you're dealing with the lawyers from the organization, which frankly tend to be, and then usually the large organizations, and I won't mention one that's coming to my mind right now, but the lawyers are kind of off in their island, like, no, here's what we're doing this, and you're having a great time with the account team, and they're like, I know I'll try to go to bat, I understand, and try to go to bat, and then the lawyers don't care. I think as long as it's not that situation, I think if the they're not giant, right? They're big, but they're not giant, meaning, I have market cap over $1 trillion. You can generally have a conversation with them.
Yeah, I guess they size out of that at some point.
I think they do size out of that at some point, Anthony. Yeah.
Very good, very good. All right, Jim, we're going to start with you on this question. Once an organization has decided what applications are going to be sunset, what are some techniques for doing so in a cost-effective manner? One of them, I'm sure, is calling Harmony, but in general.
Yeah, I think, again, our approach is to look for the best solution for the client. So a lot of times, the archival market's relatively new. It's getting more populated by the day. But as we kind of were pioneers, the thought of archiving really was not a available solution to a lot of our customers. So their past historic kind of point of reference was, I need to migrate data. So kind of over the years, we've kind of came to best of breed solution and recommendation around best practices around what should be migrated and migrated successfully versus what could extend what's already an expensive and time consuming and labor intensive process to going, well, let's do a certain set of migration of data, but then follow that with a comprehensive archive. So that usually puts providers at ease, meaning they're looking at, I need to provide care to patients, and I need to make sure that I have the data that was in my comfortable legacy application I used for years, once they see that an archive can provide that same level of comfort and with ease around things like single sign-on from their core application, that level of entry for migration has gone down somewhat significantly. We still do full comprehensive data migrations in combination with archivals, but we've seen that kind of reduce over the last couple of years. So definitely that's a cost-effective savings. You know, again, migration can be very costly, time-consuming, frustrating, if not done well and properly. As well as more intensively is the labor and cost of time for the team on the other end that's doing the work. Again, everybody's, you know, again, with what we just talked about the last X minutes, we don't have time. The clients don't have time for the resources. They're already strapped on key kind of tier 1 activities, things like bringing their core EHRs live and upgrades and all the things for patient care. We kind of consider, you know, migrations and archival kind of a second or third tier project. So we're always kind of searching for how we can minimize labor, effort, and cost for our customers and take on that burden ourselves for them. So things like, you know, again, labor augmentation that we might be able to provide, again, recommendations around best practices to what might be a very, you know, lengthy process to something that could be, you know, months shorter. Again, anytime we can reduce project life cycle time, it's a benefit for both our organization and our customers, certainly. Among again, a couple of items there for cost-effective measures.
And Anthony, if
Very good,
okay,
Dave.
Yeah, can I follow up on that? Because I think Jim's point there in terms of the project management is a critical one. You know, in my budget, and I think any IT budget, maintenance is a big item. It's your second though line item in terms of cost. Your personnel cost is always your largest cost, and there's competition for that time, et cetera. So we're just finishing up at my current organization at Children's our first archiving project, and you know, I think in the first, you want to make sure that first one that you do is your template for how we do all of the rest, so that in each one of them you can get it done more efficiently. So as we're going live on this, you know, do your after action or your post project analysis. What could have gone differently? Implement the things that would make it go better the next time. Try to cut 10-15% of time out of that project. Do it again, and then do the same after action, and do the continuous improvement on it, so that you can make them go very quickly. And I think that's a critical item in terms of doing it in a cost-effective manner.
Excellent, Dave. Lorri?
Yeah, so here at Northern Light Health, we actually have a capital program running to do this application rationalization work, where we have 250 items on our list of applications that we are decommissioning, with a large majority of those going into the archive. So this is really relevant to us, you know, as you heard earlier, it's so important to have strong governance. And I'd say in my experience running this program, that's been the most important factor, you know, making sure your leadership really understands what application rationalization is and what legacy data management is, so that they can speak to it and support it, especially when those tough conversations come up. Early on, the most important decision that our governing body made was to decide on an enterprise data storage system. So we selected Harmony, and when you have a program like Harmony, you can store both your clinical and your financial data. So this it becomes the expectation in the organization that your historical data is going to go there and become available to all end users, so that it doesn't live on in silos. And I'd say the most important other thing is, you know, also mention, is to have a really well-defined, repeatable process. And like Dave said, you know, after we did the first 10 applications or so, we refined that and revised it, added some things to it. And that whole process needs to be really understood and communicated with both your other IT departments that are going to be involved, like your infrastructure teams, and with the customers. So we actually have a checklist that every application is run through, from large topics like whether or not we need to archive the data, to the often forgotten things like removing links from intranet pages. So that repeatable process it's critical.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. And that, I think, Lorri, that goes for just about every everything in business and everything in life that we do over and over again. And I found that to be the absolute key to our business here. And one point that I'm guessing you're going to agree with is that, you talked about a well-defined, repeatable process. That's true, but it's also true that that is never finished being defined, right? It's always continually being improved, right?
Right.
You got to keep going back to the original recipe and tweaking it, add that one step that now makes it better. So any more you want to say about that?
No, just the making sure, I have a fantastic team, and they run applications through this checklist. And once they got familiar with kind of the whole way this worked, they were able to go through the checklist much faster and say, well, this doesn't apply in this situation, or this doesn't apply to this type of data, and so forth. So they got more efficient themselves the more they did it. So yeah, the checklist is very long, but not everything applies every time.
Right. So that's another nuance in this type of thing, is the variables that have to be taken into account. All very interesting. Next question, Dave, let's start with you. What are some of the hard and soft cost savings that you've seen from archiving legacy systems?
Yeah, so the hard costs, I think we've talked about those somewhat. So you've got your maintenance costs that you can eliminate. I think there's the cost of storage, the data center, type cost that you have, and those are hard. Some of them are a little. You get into some areas where, when I ask the guys, what costs are we saving here, they get a little obscure, because if it's a system that's been virtualized, and then you're just freeing up space on a virtual system, or sometimes they're cloud-based systems, you don't have those. You're lucky from at least calculating it if it's a standalone system on its own hardware that you can decommission and get rid of. So I think those are probably easy for everyone in the audience to figure out. From a soft cost standpoint, I think that there you get into the drag and the time it takes of having all of those applications in the portfolio. There's all of the time patching systems, for instance, right? So if you have a system around and you haven't archived it, and people are still accessing it, from a security standpoint, you're still going to want to patch that, right? Because you don't want that vulnerability there, and it's a hard/soft cost that you have to deal with, and you can eliminate that cost, having expertise around, like maintaining expertise. And run into occasions sometimes like, well, if Bob goes, Bob's the only guy that knows XYZ system. What are we going to do about that? So you start to reduce your load on that from a soft cost standpoint. But then you get into your risks, right? And you have risk soft cost. And I can recall an instance where one of the places I was at, we had acquired physician practices. It may be like Lorri's situation where she mentioned all the EMRs. But many different physician practices over the years, and small physician practices. And when I got there were a lot of EMRs that were in the portfolio, and with electronic medical records, with financial information, those kinds of things. And it turns out they were often still sitting in the physician practice, and often they were still under the office manager's desk, right? So you've got risk there, and if all right, we got to do something about that. And if you can archive it, get rid of that hardware, then you're reducing almost an uncalculable risk if one of those things were to find legs and someone gained access to it and put it out on the internet, those kinds of things.
Very good, Lorri.
Well, so in addition to the things that Dave just mentioned, I'd say the most important soft cost, which you could quantify it if you tried, but is the value of the clinician's time that they spend when they're searching for information about a patient. When you don't have all your data in one place, like a Harmony Data Archive, then your clinicians have to remember logins to the old EMR. They have to remember how to navigate through them, or, they might need to look in this one and 2 or 3 others to get the complete picture. So really the time that you save the clinician from going and searching for that, especially, Jim mentioned earlier the access from the EHR. We have that set up so that our clinicians don't even have to leave the EHR they're working in to access this historical data. all the data available throughout our system in one place for that patient. So that's really huge, how valuable that time saver is for those clinicians.
And Anthony, I'll add
Jim?
too, just real quick before we move off this topic, another one is it's usually a cost center, but the HIM team. So as Dave mentioned, picture an HIM resource looking for Jane Doe's records, and they've got 100 different applications. I might have to go to a Citrix login. I might have to actually call a practice because it's under their desk. It could be, you name it, anywhere, in a very significant ROI request could take the better part of a day in some cases in those situations. So in the archival world, it's literally a click away, and instantly within 5 minutes, you have all those records in a central location. So the costs involved, we've actually had customers who've gone back and negotiated some of those third-party contracts with HIM outsourcing firms to go, look, your labor effort isn't what it used to be. We need to renegotiate our contracts for those fees. So some really, again, some hidden back office costs that don't really get the upfront clinician type cost savings and benefits, but definitely it adds up pretty quick.
Thank you, Jim. Very good. All right, Lorri, let's start with you. Dave touched on this a little bit, but what are the security considerations that must be taken into account when sunsetting applications, and what are some of the hidden dangers or costs that can be overlooked?
Well, the biggest obvious security considerations are that many of these old applications sit on servers that are, 2008, 2003. We just took care of a Server 2000 application the other day. So, from a security risk perspective, you don't want these servers in your organization. So that's one of the things that we're doing to contribute to our security risk position is by eliminating these. My team comes along, we suck the data out of them, we put them in Harmony with the Harmony team, and then we can retire these old applications. Some of the dangers that might be overlooked or costs is that, well, let me just say, you got to have a really strong partnership with your compliance team and your legal team and your organization to make sure you really understand what the retention requirements are for this data, what your policies are about preserving business data that might not be required by a regulatory agency but are needed for a business purpose, and to make sure that you understand that up front before you get into the middle of retiring an application and you didn't have money set aside for preserving the data. That it's so important to have that relationship with the compliance and security team.
Any advice there, Lorri, on having those relationships, maintaining those relationships, getting the kind of interaction that you need from those people in those departments? How have you managed to do it?
Really by just including them in the conversation, having them on our governing body. A compliance officer was out of the team of compliance, one was assigned to be our liaison, and anytime we have a question or any sort of red flag or anything, we go to him. He's willing to talk to us. It's been a huge help. So just, establishing early on those relationships and showing that you're helping improve the risk position, and we're on the same team. It's just great.
Very good, Jim.
Yeah, I would agree. Additionally, interestingly enough, in the world of EHRs, a lot of core vendors don't have the ability to do what we would call purging. So the retention rule sets, some of the document management systems do, but a lot of the EHRs and other systems don't. So as Lorri mentioned, governance around what the team's retention policies are. We have a lot of customers that say until the top two, predominant players in the market are able to purge, we're not going to purge anything. Conversely, we have other clients that as soon as it's able to be, removed from the application or the archive, they want to do that. So having the ability to have a purge rules engine, the capability of doing that selectively, in some cases by application, because blood bank data as an example has to be retained perpetually, but flip side, a lot of other data might need to be only kept 7 years as an example. So that, as well as a strong relationship of that governance team, as Lorri mentioned, with compliance, who a lot of times are in the pre-sale kind of discovery vetting process, but then they might slip away and not get enacted. But as Lorri said, we definitely look for those folks to be on the compliance team because it helps those discussions later when that comes up.
Very good, Dave.
Yeah, well, I think, first of all, I'd say that archiving is definitely a security play. I think you move from an unknown to a known. Unknown in the applications, where are they, who are they using them, to a known, which is great. I think you move from an unmanaged to a managed. So both of those things make it a great security play. And then I think, in addition to what Lorri and Jim already mentioned, getting your access right. So who needs to access the information, and why do they need to access it, and what exactly do they need to access it, and then keeping track of it, and then getting it into your normal access management process, so that you're tightly managing it.
Dave, anything on the relationships, the key relationships? We mentioned legal, compliance, security. Do you have a CISO over there? Do you have to get a lot of people at the table at the same time, so to speak, to make sure this is being handled right?
I think ideally, yeah, you do, and I think the compliance on an ongoing basis, specific questions about a specific application, I think all right. From an InfoSec standpoint, I think InfoSec is going to be heavily involved up front. So where is the archive? How is it protected? Who has access to it? What's the ongoing security stance and provisioning from your vendor? Is it on-prem or in the cloud? I think so. There's a lot of heavy involvement up front from security, and then I think after that, then I think access management becomes the game in that. And then I think a good program is, I continually like to, I got schooled in this some years ago, test yourself, right? So have not yourself, have not your InfoSec team test how you're doing in that space, but have an external party come in and continually audit you and test you. And I think in that, making sure that the archive is part of that program, and it's on a periodic basis getting tested, I think that's a good thing.
All right, very good. We're going to go do our audience poll, and let me launch that, and let's take a look at that if everyone would answer that. The panelists can answer as well. Sunsetting applications successfully is as much a political challenge as a technology challenge, because nobody wants to give up what they are used to. So do you agree or disagree with that? And that is the poll question. So if everyone would take a minute to answer that, we will take a look at those results in a few minutes. So while we're doing that, while everyone's answering, let's do our Ask a Co-panelist. Jim, I'm going to give you an opportunity to ask Dave and or Lorri a question.
Yeah, good. I appreciate it. I think as a lot of customers potential customers are kind of aligning with their strategy for archival, do you guys have any guidance as to how to start that process to get through the hurdles of approval, both from a budgeting perspective, governance, and any other challenge that you might have overcome? Any guidance or coaching that you might be able to provide the panelists?
Dave, why don't you go first?
Yeah, so I'll go first on that. So, I like to think of our budgeting process as that's the time to really try to get things done. And you present here's what we're going to do. So we're in August of 20, we're getting into 21 budget planning right now. And so we're focused as a team on identifying our IT core projects, our core initiatives, and with that, it's the any expense or capital that we may need for that, but then it's time that we may need for that. And from an archiving standpoint, those things should fit in there. And if you don't fit them in there up front, and you try to do it within the year, Jim, I think that you run into a harder problem because it's not going to be something that your end users are pressing you for the most part. For the most part, it's going to be you're pressing it because it's a sound business setup for the organization, as a steward for the organization. It's a sound business practice, for managing the technology. And so you need to press that. And I think the best time to press that is when you get your budget approved and get it locked in.
Lorri, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I would say that, in our experience, you know, we recognized early on, because of the way we grew as a system, where hospitals joined us and brought a lot of systems with us, we knew we had a lot of redundant systems, and we knew that we needed to take care of that. But in IT, we didn't have the right story to tell. You know, we recognized and had a lot of enthusiasm in IT that this was what we wanted to do, but it wasn't until we really put together a program and demonstrated over a 5-year period that this had substantial savings from an operations perspective, that was what allowed us to get momentum with hospital leadership and to get them to fund the program. So I'd say organizing it as a program is really gonna get you further than perhaps just trying to take it year by year and requesting capital for this system or that system on a one-off basis.
All right, very good. All right, we're going to take a look at our audience poll now. So I'm going to have each of our panelists guess at the agree percentage. That's what we're guessing at. What percentage agreed with this statement? Sunsetting applications successfully is as much a political challenge as a technology challenge, because nobody wants to give up what they are used to. So percentage agree. Jim, I'm going to put you on the spot, make you go first.
I'll go high. I'll say 75%.
75%. Dave?
91%.
91%. That's bold. Lorri?
Oh, I'll come in low at 60%.
60%. Well, the answer, and we'll share the results now, 95%. Dave is the clear winner. It's even higher.
And it's important not to go, because if I said 96, then I lose, right? So
Yeah,
I got to.
That's right. Like the Price is Right. But that's pretty high, 95%. So most people think that that is as much a challenge, the political aspect, as the technology challenge. Very interesting. All right, I want to get an audience question in front of you first. Dave, I'm going to throw this out to you first. How are data access requirements met after archiving data, specifically in the case when auditors want to see data in the same format as they used to see it before in the old application?
Oh, well, I think that goes back to the project, right? And I think Jim may be the best one to answer that, because he's probably dealt with it 1,000 times. But I think that goes back to the project, and within the project, you define that up front, and that's one of the reasons why it's good to have your compliance folks involved from the get-go, because you try to anticipate those types of activities. And I think in those types of activities, you might have a couple of different ways to go. And you test me, Jim, if I'm right, or you check me if I'm right. One might be with your legal and your compliance folks. They could say, look, well, here's why we don't need to do that, right? And if there's those instances, you do it the easier way. But if the answer is, well, here's why we need to do that, then I think you have to get as close as you can to seeing it in that unaltered state, and then you make sure that you're working with the vendor that can pull that off for you. Jim, am I close on that?
Yeah, I would agree, Dave. And a lot of times it's really to both panelists' point, Dave and Lorri, early compliance involvement will help through that. So we spend a lot of time in our pre-statement of work discovery phase to show even source application equivalent. So if you pick a vendor, here's what it's going to look like as a final disposition, decommissioned archive, to get buy-in and kind of pre-sign off even before we kick the project off. So we can do that with a lot of the common applications we've seen many times, as an example. And then there's technology. You know, how do you show chain of custody all the way through the archival process? And as long as you can do that, it's pretty bulletproof. So knock on wood. You know, we've never had a problem meeting an audit, you know, ever. And a lot of that's due to that pretty heavy involvement in process from the get-go. Because again, all we need to do is shut down one system and have a miss, and you know, we've got problems. So we've got safety measures involved there too. So things like storage of raw data for a period of time, so that if there is a mistake, meaning, you know, Jane Doe is the person who says we don't need to archive data, but Tim Smith comes in later and goes, I don't know what they were thinking. We have the ability to go back to that source to basically make the archive whole. Doesn't used it often. I think we've done that once in the last 3 years. But knowing that safety net is there also helps in that regard. knock on wood, like I said, no challenge around audits to our knowledge.
Lorri, anything you want to chime in with there?
Well, you know, just that even though the data doesn't look exactly the same in the archive as it did from the original EMR it was in, you know, you have the opportunity to map the fields and the layout of the tabs, if you will, in a manner that reflects the EMR that it came from, so that it has a similar feel in the Harmony data archives. That was one of the reasons why we chose it, actually, is, you know, that ability to make it feel as if it was very similar to the original EMR. So I think that can help the auditors as well when they see that, you know, it might not look exactly the same, but the layout of the data is almost the same. That helps with that conversation.
Very good. And Lorri, do you happen to have a question for one or both of your co-panelists?
Well, maybe Dave, I'll throw you what's hopefully a softball. You know, as a
that's not fair. Give them a hard time.
As a CIO, you know, it's very important to be able to tie IT projects into larger organizational goals. So could you maybe talk a little bit about how you could convince organizational leadership that a program that's as boring as legacy data preservation supports, you know, healthcare imperatives like the triple aim or others?
Yeah, happy to. So I'll just, it's a philosophy that I have, Lorri, that stewardship. And so in the program that we have as IT professionals, stewardship, I think, needs to be very high on the list. And I think about the amount of time that I've been in IT, and there was a point in time where we were a very small part of any health system's budget. You know, maybe 0.5%, definitely less than 1%. It was a small thing, right? And now we're a big chunk of the budget. And in a multi-hospital system, Lorri, I mean, if you probably laid out the IT budget against some of your hospitals, you might find that your IT budget is larger than some of the hospitals on an annual basis. And so I think stewardship's really important on that. And as well, we're in a high-tech business. So in that high-tech business, you need resources to be able to go in and update, modernize, bring new features to the enterprise. And so you need capital, you need expense to do that. And I think this, where stewardship comes in is, you know, so I don't want to keep asking for $1 every time I need to do something new, right? I want to ask for 50 cents, or I want to ask for 30 cents, because throughout the year I've been able to eliminate expense. So, you know, and it's pretty difficult to come in flat year over year, because you have things like salaries are going up, et cetera. But if you're very active in eliminating expense, that is creating a pennies on the dollar opportunity to bring in new technology for the organization. And I think I would suspect, Lorri, in your program of your archiving program, you could probably be doing calculations on the great stewardship that is, and then how that can help fund innovation at Northern Light Healthcare. That's how I would pitch it.
Thank you.
Good, Lorri? Good.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right, listen, we are almost out of time. Jim, I want to give you a final opportunity or some parting thoughts. Any of the IT executives from hospital or health systems on the line, final thoughts, piece of advice. They're grappling with this. They want to reduce they want to do what Lorri called application rationalization. It can be an intimidating project maybe before you get into it, just looking at the scope of it. Someone saying, I don't even know what I have. It can, you know, can give you the night sweats maybe. So your best advice to make them feel better.
Yeah, I think like I started off, the selection of the correct vendor is a really important thing to do. So somebody who's been around the block, you know, 50, 100,000 times is really important to pick a partner to help, you know, and expedite, if you will, some of those challenges, so that as a new journey member to archival or migration, you're not alone. So again, there's days, priorities, and archival is not necessarily the top of the heap. So as you're looking, certainly I would say lean on your vendor for that expertise, to that end. And the outcome can be most expeditious, versus something that could turn into something that's laborious, or in some cases failed attempts. So do due diligence. Certainly, I would definitely recommend highly referral checks. Lorri and Dave and the like, our customers are the best people to judge our capabilities, or others in the marketplace. And I certainly would lean on that, as most do already, but don't take it lightly. It's still a enterprise level project. And we find that some customers underestimate kind of what that program should look like. And I think the guidance that Lorri and Dave gave here today, certainly supports that and gives some really good foundational, help to making that journey successful. So appreciate everybody's time in the panel here, as well as everybody who's participated today.
Yeah, great, Jim. And I think Dave's comments to Lori's question about stewardship, positioning the work and justification of doing the work as proper stewardship, and saving you money to be able to focus on innovation was really excellent and spot on, Dave. So thank you for that. That's about all we had time for today. Regarding continuing education, you can use the final slide in this deck. You'll get an email when the on-demand recording of this event is ready for viewing. If you want to sponsor an event with Health System CIO, you could reach out to Nancy from our team. You can go to our website to register for upcoming webinars. With that, I want to thank Dave Lundal, Lorri, Page-Santacruz, and Jim Hammer for participating, and I want to thank Harmony Healthcare IT for making this event possible, and I want to thank you for attending. And with that, everybody have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you.